Welcome back, everyone, to the Tony Casillas Show. I am Tony Casillas. Thank you for joining me again. If this is your first time, thanks a lot for coming along for the ride. I am so excited about the show and our special guest today. We'll get to that later. I want to remind everyone, this is it's a show that we participate in. We want your comments. It's a show where we don't rigidly talk about sports. We talk to our guests about their life, what's going on behind the curtain of life, ups and downs, as we say, peaks and valleys, the more personal touch in interviewing, and that's something I really enjoy doing. We have a couple of segments every week. One is our X's and O's, as we ask our guests, kind of a deeper questions, if you will. And then we have binge watching, because guess what? We all been binge watching this through this pandemic. So it's always great to find out what people are binging on, whether it's watching TV, whether it's exercise, whatever is kind of preoccupying their time as we try to navigate through this crazy time of our life. And as always, we're going to talk football, because guess what? It's in my DNA. And we're going to talk about those Dallas Cowboys. It's been a little despair lately, but we're going to get into that, the last game, and then their next opponent as we try to navigate through the NFL and this so far dismal season. And also, I want to remind everyone to stay active on your social media. You can watch our show on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, different platforms. You can watch the show, and we want you to, again, participate your comments, because as we get through more episodes, we're going to have nice giveaways, and it's all about you participating and getting your comments about our show. All right, so as I mentioned, we have a special guest, a guy that I've worked with for several years, a guy that I have a lot of respect for. Has been in the Dallas-Fort Worth media since 1994. I'm not going to give away his age, but he's got gray hair. Not gray, but great hair. A guy that I have the utmost respect for. Fair, I think, most of the time. Opinionated. Doesn't look for that soapbox platform, if you will. Doesn't take advantage of that. Just an all-around great guy, the great Mike Doocy. Mike Doocy, welcome to the Tony Casillas Show. It's kind of interesting. You're on the other side, and I'm asking you questions. And thanks for joining me, brother.
I'm nervous. Oddly enough, I can't remember the last time I was nervous on radio or TV. This doesn't make any sense. We've done this 1,000 times.
No, is that
together.
a condescending remark, or is
No,
that?
it's a sign of respect. It's a sign of reverence for the host.
I love you. I love your personality. I always kid you about your hair, and the older you get, it may change a little, but you got a nice set of hair. And I think that's over the years. I mean, you've been in this market since 1994, and I know there's a lot of events that maybe you've probably in this market, you probably, you lose more hair. Right. But the fact that you have a great head of hair, is that always been the prerequisite back in the day when you go and get a TV job, that you got to be judged by how much hair you have, or is? Because, I mean, you're a handsome dude.
Well, this is getting weird, Tony. That's always the...
Not weird. It's not like I have a man crush on anything. Maybe it's just hair envy.
Everything's all right.
No,
believe me. I'm getting workout envy looking at you. My God, you're wasting away to nothing here, which is not a problem for me, unfortunately. In terms of the hair, there's kind of the cliche of the anchor man, and the helmet hair and all that stuff. And when I look back at old photos now from 25 years ago when I first got here, I'm like, God, that hair was pretty good. That hair was pretty good back then. Laufenberg used to give me a hard time about it. Guys that I would run into, other media guys. And then the ticket started to accuse me of wearing a toupee. And for the record, as I've gotten older and it's gotten grayer and a little bit thinner, I would say to them, look, if I'm going to wear a toupee, it's not going to be a gray thinning toupee.
Exactly.
It's going to be a Marv Albert, muskrat on the top of my head.
No, that's a bad one. Okay, I would expect you to wear something better than that, and to hold up to your reputation.
Well, the funny thing is, Tony, my dad went bald at a fairly young age. All I remember is my dad.
But don't they say it's from your mother's side?
It is. Yeah. And my mom, fortunately, was not bald. God rest her soul. So I inherited her her hair apparently. But yeah, if the hair is my legacy, I guess I can live with it.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to think how long I've been working with you and contributing. I've been on the air with you for many, many years, and people ask me. I said, what's Mike like? And I said, he's pretty genuine, but he's got a great personality off camera. I mean, you see that. I mean, you're such a professional on camera, but it's been 1994, you've been in this market that long. Does it seem like it's been that long? I mean, I know that you look back in time and it just goes by fast, but to say that you've been in this market that long, it's gone by pretty fast.
Yeah, that's a good question, because on one hand, it does seem like it's zipped by, like for all of us. The older we get, it seems like the years have just, where did the time go? But on the other hand, so much has changed in just the way we do our jobs, and the advent of social media, and just the way we cover the teams. And obviously, the last 9 months has changed that even more with COVID. But even setting that aside, I look at back when you were playing, and you were on the Cowboys pretty soon after I got here. I can't remember the exact year you came back.
91 was my first year. Yeah.
Okay. So then
I came back in 96 and 97.
Okay. So I'd been here a couple of years by the time I got to know you.
You actually got to see some good football.
Yeah. I was right in my bio that I've covered Stars and Mavs championships, and I've even been around long enough to see the Cowboys win.
Unfortunately, it was a quarter of a century ago.
The last
that'll
Super
really
Bowl.
age it.
But it was, things have changed a lot through the years, just in the way we do our jobs. And so in some ways it seems like every bit of whatever it's been now, 26 or 27 years. But when we came here, from small town Iowa, my wife Ruth and I, and our daughter Christina was young, only I think 4 years old at the time. We were like, we'll come down here. It's too good of an opportunity to pass up. The money's good, obviously a little bit better than Cedar Rapids was. We'll stay for a couple, 3 years, and then go back home. Well, this has become home, and there are so many people who live in the Metroplex who have that exact same story. And you know this, Tony, that you just look at your neighborhood and the people who aren't from Dallas-Fort Worth, aren't even from the Southwest.
Right.
They're transplants who've come down here and realized what a great place to live and work that it is. And that's pretty much the story for us.
You're from Bancroft, Iowa, population 750 people.
That's right.
When I look at you, I just don't see you being that's a small town. What the hell did you do growing up in a small town like that?
It was a great way to grow up. It really was. I was just back there not long ago for my dad's 90th birthday. We were talking about that, and I love going back there still, and I go back there as often as I can. There was just one school in town, as it so happens. It was a Catholic school, so I grew up, going to the only high school in town. And it gave me an opportunity to do things that maybe I wouldn't have been able to do at a bigger school, because I loved sports. I wasn't a great athlete, but I could play. We didn't even have football. We were that small.
Yeah.
We had 50 in my class. And so, but it was a great baseball town. So, we played baseball spring, summer, and fall. And then, basketball when the snow got too deep to play baseball. So just the opportunity to participate in sports, I'd say, was the thing that really sticks out. But we'd cruise Maine with our girlfriends, and go to a neighboring town to see a movie, because you'd have to drive 15 miles to the bigger town of maybe 3,000 people. They had a movie theater there, and just do kind of the normal things that kids of the 70s did, I guess. But it was a cool way to grow up, and I sometimes, especially when we go back, wonder what it would have been like if my kids had grown up. Because I tend to idealize, I think, a lot of us, if we were fortunate enough to have happy childhoods, we idealize what it was like back then. And certainly there are, a million different ways to grow up in a bunch of different areas and still have a great life. But I really wouldn't trade that experience for anything.
Yeah, it's into perspective, because, I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and, it wasn't 750 people, it's bigger. So everyone thinks they kind of stereotype you, from Oklahoma, you're this, country guy, but essentially from Iowa. I know that you have a passion for your Iowa Hawkeyes. You're an alum from Iowa. As far as your broadcast, I know you've mentioned before we came on, did this interview, you used to be in the radio. What was your first job out of college? I mean, where'd you start initially to your career?
I worked at a bunch of small radio stations around Iowa. I was lucky enough to get a job at a station while I was in college. I spent a little time at the student radio station, but then sent a tape to one of the, and I say this advisedly, big stations in Iowa City there, but it was like a commercial station, and I got to do news and sportscasts for them and actually made money doing it while I was going to college. So I thought I'd hit the jackpot. So I get to cover the Hawkeyes, while I was in college. So that was a blast. And that's
was it play-by-play?
It was not play-by-play.
Okay.
It was, short reports that you do.
Yeah,
and this was before ESPN radio, for example. So I'd even get picked up by some of the national networks. ABC Radio would do a short sportscast on a weekend. And here's Mike Doocy in Iowa City with the latest. And I do a little 15-second report. And then I'd have a check in my mailbox from ABC Radio.
That's mailbox money. Nothing
Friday.
wrong with that.
That was great. That was great. So, but it was a really neat time to be in school there. Hayden Fry got there and began to turn around the football program. And Lute Olson was there as the basketball coach, and they went to the Final Four. And to be around Big Ten sports then was really a lot of fun. But after college, I got jobs in smaller markets where I got just fantastic experience. A little town called Webster City, Iowa, not far from where I grew up, a town of about 10,000 people. But that's where I did a lot of play-by-play. Basketball, baseball, football, wrestling is huge in Iowa. The state wrestling tournament is bigger than the basketball tournament. Yes, there's a skill to calling wrestling on the radio.
That would be... I guess if you got the knack to do play-by-play, you can tell the story. But, wrestling is just two individuals going at it to tell the story. Was that probably the hardest play-by-play sport to do?
I think maybe narrating the homecoming parade was even more difficult. You did that, or we do a 90-minute racing show at the little county speedway there on Saturday nights. And we'd trade off doing it because nobody wanted to do it because you had to host it alone for an hour and a half at this little dirt track with these guys who were running a gas station during the week and then driving these stock cars on weekends.
That's
and
great.
You're trying to convince these guys to come over and do interviews with you to fill the time. And it was, stuff like that. But it just teaches you things that you can never learn in a classroom. That's a cliche, but it's true because you learn how to think on your feet, how to ad lib, how to fill time in ways that are hopefully interesting. But I fell in love with play-by-play at that job. And if I have one regret in my career, and I don't deserve to have any regrets. I've been so fortunate, so lucky. But play-by-play is what I always wanted to do after that. I think it's the most fun thing to do in sports broadcasting, maybe any kind of broadcasting, is to actually describe an event for 2 or 3 hours. And I really admire the guys who do that well. When I see a Joe Buck or a Al Michaels, certainly, or Jim Nantz, at the highest level, or the great voices in our market, Cooper Steen and Followell and Eric Nadel and Brad, of course. I just think, calling the action is a lot of fun. But yeah, those were, Mason City, Webster City, Topeka, Kansas. Then I got a chance to move into TV out of Topeka, and by '94 But by the time I got into TV, it was actually fairly soon between that time and the time I got to Dallas. So my career is fairly typical of somebody who does what I do. You move around a lot early, and then if you're lucky enough to find a good job, you hang on to it for dear life for as long as you can.
Well, absolutely. You've done that. You've done it quite well. Award-winning broadcaster, I may add, and your bio and everything that goes along with that. Real quick, you mentioned play-by-play. Who's your GOAT play-by-play broadcaster?
I always really admired Dick Enberg and his style.
Mm-hmm.
There was just something really smart, very, he could sound excited on the air, a lot of enthusiasm, but I thought he used the language really well. As I stumble on the word language, he used the language well. But I
can relate to that, Mike.
I grew to love Pat Summerall too, and I think I admire.
Oh, yeah.
I think he was almost underrated in some ways because
great.
he was just such a minimalist in the way that he used the language, and he got out of the way for Madden and all that. And then it's such an honor to get to know Pat a little bit after I moved here. And he and Aikman did a show at our studio like in '96 maybe for 1 year. And just to hear Pat tell stories out in the hallway after that show was so much fun. And so I really admired him. Another play-by-play guy who just retired is a hockey guy named Doc Emmerich.
Oh yeah, I just saw that.
And man, I think hockey's one sport I've never called, and I think that may be the most difficult of the so-called Big Four. He was outstanding too, but it's a skill, it's an art, it's a science. You just have to be so well prepared. The good ones are. But then there's just a knack that some guys have to be able to just pick up the action quickly and turn it back around to their audience. It's neat to observe that.
Well, I think I discovered him more when I watched the Stars and the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And the fact he's doing it remotely, wasn't even in the building, was amazing how he could tell this story and make you excited about it, even if you weren't a hockey fan. I mean, it was very entertaining. So you mentioned you started here in the market in 1994. We fast forward to 2020. Back in March, all of a sudden the sports world came to a standstill. Your life came to your job came to a standstill. What was that like when all of a sudden there was nothing to talk about? And that's your job, is to be able to talk about sports, but we didn't have that going on because of the pandemic.
As you know, what has kind of been unique to our sports department at Fox 4 is about 2 years ago, September, we changed our approach and started doing a 30-minute show every night, free for all.
Make sure you tune in on Sunday nights.
And we sort of, I think, started to hit our stride on that, and then COVID hit. So that 10:30 block obviously had to be dedicated primarily to coverage of the coronavirus, and that, once a generation news story, and I totally understand that. So on top of not having any sports to talk about, we would not have been able to fill a show anyway. On top of not having sports to talk about, our whole dynamic changed in terms of not really having that time slot anymore. Slowly, we're building back up now, and I'm really thankful for that. We're getting 8-10 minutes during the 10:30 block, and I'm on a lot during the newscasts and stuff too, with things like the World Series going on now, and the Stars made their run, and on and on. But it was, I think I have a lot in common with a lot of people who are watching and listening, in that it just felt really disorienting early on. I mean, look, I love my wife. We've been married 37 years. But I started to think maybe the reason our marriage had lasted so long is that I was gone every night. And I think she may have been thinking that even more. And I'm such a...
when are you going back to work?
Creature of habit. Exactly.
When are you going actually to the studio?
Right.
I'm tired.
And now going to work has been primarily going from, the family room to the office. And about, a few weeks in, they brought a camera up to my office at home, and a few studio lights and a transmitter, and I flip that on when it's time to go on TV. Do a ton of Zoom calls. I've done them with you. We've done them with a lot of the guys that we've kind of leaned on as guests through the years, and Sam Gannon, my co-host, and I typically record our Zoom call for our segment of the show. So you make adjustments. I can't wait until we're back. I never thought I'd say this because you've seen our studio. I can't wait until our building, but I can't wait. I can't wait until I'm back in that studio. I've been back 3 or 4 times, but it's just a lot easier to do our jobs when we're there, and can talk to each other in person, and our producers actually have the equipment that they need to do their jobs. Our producer's a guy named Adrian, and how he's gotten this stuff on the air from home, I'll never know. I mean, it's one thing talking into a camera and writing some stuff and maybe picking out a few sound bites for him and trying to keep track of what's going on. But to actually pull off the technology from your home office that he's had to do, I can't imagine that.
Yeah, and it's so odd because at a time where we didn't have any sports because of COVID, they move everything back, and all the different social distancing. Now we just have this onslaught of sports, and so it's almost like an overload, because all of a sudden we're reporting hockey, basketball, football, all at the same time. How hard was that to be able to? I guess it made your job a lot easier, but doing it from Zoom calls and not doing it in studio, how did that change?
Yeah, it was easier in that we had tons of stuff to talk about. There was never a problem coming up with content for our segment.
Right.
But it was that constant adjustment of trying to, how are we going to pull this soundbite in? Where do we find this highlight? Where are we going to put this particular story? So we went from kind of famine to feast, and here pretty soon we're going to go back to it just being football once the World Series is over. So that's going to be a little odd again, in that we're going to have, it's football 4 days a week, 5 days a week. So it's not going to be that difficult. But I don't know how you feel about it. I'm surprised that the leagues have been able to pull it off the way that they have. I mean, I didn't. If you would have told me that hockey and basketball and now baseball were going to be able to play all the way through a championship series, and the NFL is 6 games into their season, there have been problems, but not widespread problems. I wouldn't have believed you, but they've managed to do it.
Well, I mean, if we could contain it like the sports world has, and not let it throughout the country, I mean, learn something from that. But it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
I know over the years you've had some interesting storylines. You've had interesting stories to cover, obviously, in this market with the Cowboys, and when you talk about the hockey with the Stars and baseball and everything. What's some of your more defining moments that you remember covering sports? I mean, it could be championship, it could be controversy. When something like that comes to mind, what's on the top of your list?
It's weird that I would still say this, but it's hard for anything to top 3 weeks after I got here, Jimmy and Jerry splitting up. I mean, it was just, I was so new to the market. My head was still spinning. And I remember standing out there at Valley Ranch in that meeting room, which you sat in many, many times, getting ready for that press conference, and just trying to figure out, I swear to God, in my head, I'm saying, just don't call them Jerry Johnson and Jimmy Jones by mistake. Just make sure you get these names right. And I mean, I think it was only a few weeks after that, maybe months after that, that I realized the enormity of the story that I just covered, that we had all covered. It turned out, oddly, to be a really neat turn of events for me, because we had the Cowboys package at the time on Fox 4, so we did the coaches show.
Right.
I came here thinking I'd be hosting the Jimmy Johnson show. Turns out I was hosting the Barry Switzer show. And as a guy, I know you respect both, as do I, but it's a lot more fun hosting a Barry Switzer show than it would have been hosting a Jimmy Johnson show. And Barry was so good to me. I mean, it was just, I'll never be able to thank him enough. And I know he's one of your closest friends, obviously. So it's kind of funny how things work out. But I think of that in terms of just the most fun time I've had. It was probably the Stars 2 years where they went to the Stanley Cup Finals and won it once. There was just something about those guys. I don't know if it's because I'm from up north and they're all from up north. Or I got to know a lot of those guys. And you get to do some features that really stick with you. I remember Johnny Oates, the great Rangers manager, a few years after he left, was diagnosed with cancer, and he allowed us to come out to his home in Virginia and do a feature with him. And
I remember that.
Man, it was just the most emotional thing I've ever covered. So I think that, and now I'm sure when I look back in my career, just what we've had to do and how we've had to adjust over the last 9-10 months. Coming up on a year now, we'll be at the top of that list of memorable things too. But you've lived here a long, long, long time too. We're lucky to have what we have here,
some stories
what we're able to cover.
I remember vividly the whole Kenny Rogers.
Oh, that's
right.
I
and then set this up, and I'll let you tell the story, tell what the event, what happened. I believe it was Larry Rodriguez, the long time cameraman, and in this market, worked for. I don't know if he's still with him, but
he's retired now.
He's retired now, but explain that set that up. I mean, it was a little altercation between him and Larry, and I believe it was, I don't know, some remarks were said, and Kenny Rogers, a pitcher for the Rangers at the time, was a little sensitive to criticism.
This is late 90s, I guess, and we're out at the ballpark. And Kenny had been criticized in the media, and he was clearly upset by it, and he didn't want to talk. And we're in the clubhouse where, you can shoot, interviews, and Larry was getting just some shots of Kenny, and Kenny didn't like it. And they went back, as I remember, they went back and forth a little bit. Larry shut his camera off. I'm out there with Larry at the time. And we get out onto the field pregame, or we're walking out onto the field, and Larry continues to shoot him, backpedaling. And you've had guys do this to you many, many times, backpedaling in front of them, getting video of him as Kenny's walking out to do his warm-up on the mound. They get out into the mound area. Larry's continuing to shoot. Kenny's had enough. Kenny turns to the camera. Can't remember if he told him to stop first or not. It doesn't matter. Kenny grabbed the lens and yanked it from side to side and threw it down. And Larry went down and was injured as a result of it. So, yeah, that was memorable. Not that there's anything funny about this story, but a little funny side story.
I saw you in the back. I'm like, Mike, you gotta take care of your boy,
probably
man.
Told you this before.
You gotta get his back.
I probably told you this before, but yeah, I was there, just sort of off to the side, saying something. Hey, Kenny, it's okay, man. We went to training camp the next summer in Oxnard, and Zimmer was the Cowboys defensive coordinator at the time.
Mike Zimmer.
And we walk on the field the first day, and Mike Zimmer makes a beeline over to Larry and me. He said, "Larry, okay?" Yeah, okay. And Doocy, I noticed you were just close enough to be in the frame, but just far away enough not to get hurt. What the hell's that all about? I said, "Coach, you're on to me."
I thought the same thing. I'm like, Mike, I thought you just jump in there, but that was,
that's.
I remember that. I mean, that was a big story. I mean, that was obviously, back then. And you imagine if they had social media. I mean, but that was always. So, what was the most difficult athlete that you've had to work with during your time here in the DFW market?
One more story real quick, just about a memorable one that I should probably mention was a couple of years ago. Training camp reminds me of it when I declined to do the interview with Jerry.
Oh, I remember that.
He and his PR people decided at the last minute that certain topics were going to be off limits. And it's totally unlike me to do that, because I've always felt, even if they put restrictions on it, it's my job to make sure our viewers can hear from newsmakers.
But did he ever do that before, prior to that?
No.
Did he put restrictions on it? Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily that there were restrictions. It's just that I was told about it 30 seconds before the interview rolled. Right. So I didn't do it. And social media did exist then. I really heard from a lot of people. It's just kind of, it's amazing how something that small can supposedly become a big deal. The answer to your next question is John Wetland, the Rangers relief pitcher.
Yeah.
Was notorious for being difficult. He lived up to it every second. In terms of scary, you know this guy well. Charles Haley could be pretty frightening toward the media. He's a teddy. He's a teddy bear now.
Yeah, he is an imposing figure. Yeah.
And he would be in a mood where he didn't want to be bothered, and you didn't want to get in his way. But it's funny, and I guess this is a function of me getting older now. I used to know a handful of guys anyway in the locker room to the point where I felt, that they knew my name and we could have a discussion. And that really just isn't the case anymore, in part because I think when you were playing, guys watched local TV news. And guys, they got their sportscast from the locals. And I think now, it's an internet generation and there's just not that kind of connection. But for the most part, I've had pretty good, relationships with guys, even some guys who were considered difficult. Dion and I always got along pretty well. Will Clark from the Rangers, for some reason, he and I hit it off, and he certainly had his issues with other members of the media. Baseball guys tend to be a little more reserved. I think they tend to trust the writers who are there every day, and I understand that. But more not a ton of real negative experiences with guys.
Yeah, you mentioned social media, and obviously that's changed the way sports is covered. And I'm sure you've had to kind of adjust as you go along with this. And you mentioned players. And to me, when you brought that up, it seems to me, and to your point about guys now getting their sports, and everything from the internet, are they harder to work with now? Are they more, and I hate to, not trying to put words in your mouth, but are they more entitled or more sensitive now because of just what's out there, and not really, because I always thought it's important to give the local sports guy the time so he can, do a story. Is that not the case anymore?
I don't know that it's just for the local sports people. I just don't know that guys are as available to anybody in the media, because I think they have a direct way to, in their minds, a direct way to talk with their with their
their
fans.
audience. Yeah.
With
The platform.
that said, and it's unfair, but it's the way it is. The vast majority of our coverage is Cowboys. And when I think, COVID's a weird year. Nobody's in the locker room now. But, last year, Dak would still, talk every day, and Zeke would talk, or not every day, but once a week, like Aikman did back in the day. And Zeke would talk once a week, like Emmett did back in the day. I suppose there are fewer guys maybe who are available than used to be. But I think that's just more a function of what type of locker room you happen to have any given year and the types of personalities that you have. But I think guys are probably a little more willing to pay the fine for not talking than they used to be because of the way the contracts are now.
Yeah, especially if they're not having a very good season. So, again, you've been in this market since 1994. You've seen a lot of great players play in this market. You've witnessed a lot of great events. I'm sure people have asked you this before. Your Mount Rushmore of players in this market. I know it's a tough question, but what comes to mind when that question is asked?
I love this topic. I really
it's
do.
It's a good debate.
It's impossible to
it is.
Have any one right answer. In my time here, Dirk would have to be on it.
Yep.
And I'm not going to necessarily say that there has to be one from each sport necessarily. But to me, if it's an all-time DFW sports Mount Rushmore.
Well, let's just do the time you've been.
The time that I've been here.
That'd be fair.
It would probably be, Aikman, Emmett, Dirk. Fourth one's tough. Madonna probably would be on there, and then you're leaving a Ranger off, and they went to the World Series 2 straight years. But I don't know who the face of the Rangers would be over the 25 years I've been here.
Yeah,
I got here late
Pudge,
for Nolan,
Rodriguez?
but it'd probably be Pudge. Yeah, so you could argue him, and you could also argue that I was late to the Aikman-Emmett era as well. But they've still been such dominant figures in the time since 1994 that I've been here. So
that's a great problem to have. Consider all the names that it's hard to mention, to come up with four guys because there's so many great athletes that played in this market. I mean, that's how good this market's been.
And if it's just personalities,
oh gosh,
it's got to be Jerry, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
He's the overriding sports figure of the last 25, 30 years in this market.
And we've had some good owners. You think about Mark Cuban, you talk about Jerry. Obviously, Jerry's always the controversial as far as some decision making, him want to be on it. And then you throw in
Tom Hicks had some success. Yeah.
And so, the Rangers, they went to back-to-back World Series. They went to World Series, but it's an interesting question. Nationally, guys that all-time of players that when it comes to mind, what era, whatever it was, either living or alive, what's your 4 favorite athletes that you? That's another great question.
Boy, it is. I grew up, and I hate to admit this down here, I did grow up a Yankee fan. So
nothing wrong with that.
Mickey Mantle was my first memory of an athlete that I idolized.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure he would go on an all-time U.S. sports Mount Rushmore, but he would probably go on mine. Ali would.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Greatest all time.
Ali would. Beyond that. Boy,
that's a tough one.
That's a good question.
It's hard, because when someone asks you a question, and so it's like popularity, what comes to mind when there's so many? Maybe Michael Jordan?
Obviously, yeah. Clearly Jordan would have to be.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably, we're watching one who's still playing right now.
LeBron?
That's LeBron. I was going to say Tom Brady, too.
Oh, that's right. Tom
so
Brady.
If you're really if I'm taking my personal tastes out of it, God,
it's tough.
How do you not put Babe Ruth on there? If we're going truly all time. But in the time since I've been here, the national Mount Rushmore would include Jordan and LeBron and Tom Brady.
When it's all said and done, when the book's written, who's the greatest of all time? Michael Jordan or LeBron?
I still think it's Jordan, just because Jordan was a killer. Jordan had that X factor.
And after watching The Last Dance, it kind of really adds his legacy.
Probably influences me too much.
Yeah.
I think what I always say is LeBron would win one-on-one If they're just going to go to, the park across the street from my house and play one-on-one, I think LeBron would win 8 out of 10 times. Just because he's bigger, he's stronger, he could back MJ down every time, and LeBron could probably block Jordan's shot, a few times and stuff. But just in terms of a guy who combined just an incredible skill set, just continued to get better. That's what people forget.
Yeah.
As he got older, he became a better shooter, smarter player. MJ just by an eyelash.
It's a great bar question. You're sitting in the
it
bar.
is.
It's like,
Remember bars?
Yeah. Come on.
I remember
I have to
bars.
throw a few back. Yeah, I remember bars. Yeah, exactly. What is that? All right, my last one in regards to covering sports. And it's just been a sensitive subject, the whole social injustice, the platform in which we see sports now. Someone that covers sports and have to report it and talk about it. How difficult? I don't know if that's the right word, but how to give the story and be sensitive to that. I mean, with all that's going on. I mean, how does that make your job? Does it make you harder? Is it did you change your thing? I mean, how do you adjust to that? Because I'm not saying it's something that's impeding your ability to broadcast, but how's it change everything?
It does change it, and you're right in the way you asked the question. In that, it's hard to say whether it makes it more difficult,
right,
or whether it sort of gets in
sensitive,
the way.
I guess more sensitive. I guess, and
it is challenging because it's there, and there's no denying that it's there. What I try to do is just report on what I see, okay? And in some ways, I look at social media and my broadcasting as two different things. I am more likely to throw an opinion out on Twitter on a topic like, social injustice than I am on the air. I just look at it as two different platforms.
Why is that?
Whether that's right or wrong.
Why is that? I mean, is it?
I think because I've established a style that my viewers expect now from the last 25, 27 years. Not that I won't put an opinion out there if I think it's important, but I don't want to tell people how they should think. I don't want to be preachy. I just have never thought that I needed to be that way. But if guys are kneeling during the national anthem, I mean, obviously that's a story. You're going to talk about it. I have an opinion on whether I think these guys are.
But how hard is it, Mike, to say that I agree with that or disagree with that? Is that something you have to stay neutral on because of what you're reporting?
What I tend to say is, I think empathy is a great thing to have. And I think trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is a great thing to have. Just on this topic in particular, I'll tell you what I think. And I've said this from the beginning. I've said I wish that guys would stand for the anthem.
Yeah.
Because the minute they kneel, that's going to be the only story that the haters want to talk about. The people who don't want to talk about social injustice, all they're going to want to, the entire narrative for them is going to be, see, these guys don't respect the flag.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case for most of these guys. They're not kneeling because they don't respect what the U.S. stands for. They're kneeling because they want the country to be better. That's how I feel about it. And I've never been a black man pulled over, late at night thinking I have to act a certain way to not get the crap beaten out of me either.
It's hard to relate to.
I can't relate to that. Yeah. The only encounters I've had with police officers, well, they haven't all been positive. I've gotten my share. I got 6 speeding tickets in 2 years in college. So
that's more than I've ever had.
Amend that. And I've got, so many good friends in law enforcement who I respect so much.
Yeah.
And that's where the struggle is for me. I don't want to come off as insulting them in any way, but I can't walk in their shoes because I don't do what they do. And I can't walk, in a black guy's shoes either because I've never been in that position. So that's a long answer to your question.
It's a hard question to answer, and I think it'd be hard whenever you have an opinion and you believe in something, and you're having to report what you observe and what you see for the viewers, to not like some other people do we know in this market, get on a soapbox and take advantage of. And that's what I respect about you. You don't use that as a way to get ratings. I mean, yeah, everybody wants to, hear something controversial, but I respect the fact that you report what you're seeing, and it's not about a huge agenda. It's not about your persona, so to speak. It's more what we're watching and what we're viewing and what you're reporting.
And I think there's a place for both. I really do. And I think styles make fights, as they say. And I have my style, and Dale's become a huge personality. Doing
I didn't even have to mention any names.
No, he does, and he's really good at it. And I think he believes what he says, and I respect the hell out of that.
Yeah.
And I feel fortunate in many ways in that I can do what I do in the way that I do it, and that he can do what he does in the way that he does it, and that we live in a country that allows both, or a media culture that allows both.
Well, you both have your niche, and that's been your niche for 25 years, and that's why people watch you, watch you at night and follow you on Twitter, because you're so opinionated. Just don't talk politics. To wrap this up, this part of the interview, is what advice do you give to aspiring journalists that want to get into sports? Well, I know it's changed with the social media and the electronic media, how we get our sports and everything. And, it's changed the whole dynamic of how you report it and everything. But for an aspiring journalist major that wants to get into sports, what would you recommend? What's your advice to them?
My advice has always been get reps. Get as many reps as you can. Go to your classes, do all that stuff. That's fine. Work at the student station. But learn how to actually do what you want to do after college. If you want to be on the air, learn how to read aloud. Learn how to read wire copy. Learn how to write. Learn how to write well. If you want to be a photographer, learn everything there is to know about that camera, and don't just think about it during class. If at all possible, get a job at a real station. If you're in Lubbock's a fairly small TV market. If you're at Texas Tech, you can figure out a way to get your foot in the door at a station. Or if you're going to Abilene Christian, some of these markets are the best places for journalism. I'm talking about broadcast journalism now. Journalists to go to college, because the markets are smaller and you can actually really work at the station and get paid too, but actually feel the responsibility of being part of a broadcast while you're in college. You need the degree. You didn't really need the degree when I went to college to do what I do, but now you do. So not to poo-poo college, but I like college and everything. Go through the formality, get the degree, but the experience is what's going to make the difference for you.
And I got to congratulate you. Your Iowa Hawkeyes are actually playing football. I mean, this interview will post in a couple of weeks, but you already had played Purdue, and I'm trying to think who the game is after that.
I should know the next one. I don't.
I know the Purdue, because
Purdue's coach has COVID, so hopefully that game happens.
Yeah, so I know you got a little bigger smile on your face. I know you're such an avid Iowa Cyclone fan. So
Hawkeyes, you know that.
I did it on purpose.
You know that. I'm such a hypocrite too, because I didn't really think they should play college football this year. I'm like, how can you not have students going to class?
But why did they make the decision,
You're still playing college football. But then I like the fact that that Fox gets to show college football, and I like the fact that my Hawkeyes are finally going to play. So I'm as big a hypocrite as all these politicians we criticize.
Yeah, we won't talk about the Sooners. It's been a dismal year. All right, so we're going to go into what we call X's and O's.
Okay, good.
All right, so X's and O's. I'm going to ask you questions, and has nothing to do with the game plan of life. So whatever you decide that you want to answer, that's fine with me. But this is the fun part about the personal side of Mike Doocy.
Uh-oh.
Been married for 36 years to lovely.
I think 37.
37. Yeah. Better get it right. One thing about your anniversary. I got married on Valentine's Day, so I wouldn't. If I miss, if I forget one of those 2 days, I'm just a
double whammy.
A dummy. I like that. So what is So are you a fan of cards or flowers?
Both,
Both.
believe it or not. Yeah, both. I always go with Dozen Roses and the card. My wife gives me a hard time because the only thing I ever write on it is "Love, Mike." I don't really have a gushy message. I let the people who do the cards professionally provide the gushy message.
You know, I need to start doing that because my handwriting is so bad.
She can't read it
She's
anyway.
like, okay, I got to interpret it.
She's like, did you just insult me? Or
No,
is this-
well, I mean, it's so bad. I mean, you've seen my fingers. I can't write, and so I'm just going to put "Love Tony" on. That's good advice,
Okay.
Suri.
Let me know how that works.
I'll let you know how that works. Last romantic date you guys went on?
We, oh man, we went up to see Dad on his 90th. I mentioned, and we drove, so we came back. It's a long drive. We stayed in Kansas City on the way back, and we got a nice room at the hotel overlooking the plaza downtown in Kansas City. There, checked into the hotel, turned on the Cowboy game. 2 minutes later, Dak snapped his ankle.
Oh, that ruined the moment.
That ruined the mood for just a few minutes. So I had to work for about 3 hours, but we still there's this restaurant we like in Kansas City. We still got to this restaurant, had a great meal and a couple of glasses of wine, and I won't mention what happened afterward, but it was a nice night.
Too much.
It was a nice night.
What do they call it? The fantasy suite?
Right. They do now.
Wine or beer? I know you like your red wine.
Unfortunately for me, it's a little of both now. I got off the beer for a while. I did the wheat belly diet thing probably 5-6 years ago. And so I started to enjoy red wine. But then I thought, you know what? A couple of cold beers in the summer isn't going to kill anybody. So now it's probably more beer in the summer, more wine in the cold months.
Yeah. Let's see. So obviously you have kids. Christina and Lauren, right?
Right.
Your oldest is senior at St. Ed's, right?
Youngest is.
The youngest one?
Chris is 30 years old now.
Yeah.
Christina
wow.
is. Yeah.
That's growing up, aren't they?
It is.
So who was the disciplinary? Your wife or you? Because I was like a softie. I mean, I've always been a softie. No consequences. So who did all the who does all the discipline or did?
I'd say Ruth probably more than me, in part because she was home more at the time the kids were at home. You know, I'd have Friday, Saturday off typically, so I'd see them after school, and we'd do stuff Friday nights and Saturday, and it tended to be fun stuff, and taking them to soccer games and volleyball and swim meets and all that. And Ruth had to deal with sort of the real life of this report card says what, you know, after getting it at 3:30 on a Thursday. So I've had to dole out. Luckily, I haven't had to dole out a whole lot of discipline. My kids are pretty good kids, but Ruth probably had to whip them into shape a few more times than I have.
Who's the first one to apologize for something?
She would say that it's her. I think I'm probably more likely to apologize first, though. So let's move. We better move on to the next question.
It's always me. That's a first.
That's a bone of contention.
Yeah,
I want to make it to 38 years. Here we go.
That's really all right. So my last one, the X's and O's, as far as to get out of the doghouse free. I love this question because unlike you, I'm always the one to apologize. So I always need advice. People need advice. But if something happens, what do you go to? You mentioned card and flowers. What else? I mean,
I think like maybe performing an unexpected household chore without being asked is a good one.
That's a good one, yeah.
Which for me is pretty much any household chore.
Yeah.
So if I do anything, she's like, "Did you clean the dishwasher out, or did those dishes just levitate to the cupboard by themselves?" So try to do something like that. You can build a little equity that way.
An unhidden talent that Mike Doocy has that no one may know. I know you can sing.
Unfortunately,
right?
I've sung enough on the ticket and stuff. That,
what you got? You got a little acapella over there.
There's an artist, Tony, long before your time, but he was known as the Voice, and one of his signatures,
Blake Shelton,
went something like, "Fly me to the moon.
Oh wow!
Let me play among the stars." Everybody, let me sing.
I'm not going to mess it up. I'm just going
to Jupiter and Mars.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Love to sing. My mom was probably the greatest musician I ever knew, God rest her soul. Great keyboard artist, great piano player, taught herself how to play the guitar, perfect pitch, which I wish I had. I'm close. I don't quite have that anymore.
I don't know. You sound pretty good.
Big
there.
regret is that I never learned. I never stayed with those piano lessons. Those nuns at the convent just scared me too much.
Well, I didn't. I
They'd
definitely
wrap your
did.
knuckles, you know.
I definitely didn't hang with the singing lessons because I didn't use the money. That was not money well
You
spent.
can't have everything, man. You got a lot.
I
You know,
know.
if you can't sing, that's the least.
Man,
of your
I wish
worries.
I could sing, man. That's inspiring right there. All right, so another segment we do is binge watching. All right, as you know, Mike, over the last 9 months, we've binged on a lot of different things, but most notably has been programming, Netflix, whatever it is, whatever your platform is. Any shows that you and your wife have been watching over this time?
We have binge watched, and I've never been a binge watcher before this. I mean, I've had certain series through the years that I've gotten into. I love The Sopranos. That was probably the first
That's a great-
HBO
oh, yeah.
Trademark series that I really fell in love with. I loved Mad Men.
Yeah.
We are into a series now that I would really, and it's kind of a girly series. I'm gonna admit this, but it's an Australian series called Offspring. It's fantastic. Think of sort of Friends, the series Friends,
yeah.
but better, and I think deeper
Right.
and more emotional. It's really it's a story about a family in Australia, and the lead character is sort of the Australian Jennifer Aniston, so that makes it worth
Yeah.
watching in and of itself.
That's the real reason why you're watching it.
What else have we've watched other stuff?
There's
And
so
I-
much out there.
And we binged on a.
You should watch Nurse Ratched. Have you heard about Nurse Ratched?
No.
Oh, that's pretty good.
From Cuckoo's Nest, that character?
Yeah. It's the modern day, but still set in that setting. But yeah. It's,
Okay. Oh, that's one of my favorite
Oh
movies.
my gosh, the first 10 minutes. I mean, you're going to be like, I don't know if I'm going to watch this, but I recommend that one.
We binged, I think this is an ABC series. I don't know if it's still on. A Million Little Things, I think the name of it was. Just kind of a light little show about, a bunch of middle-aged friends who do stuff and all that. That's a really generic description.
There's so much.
A couple of different ones.
I mean,
too,
you find out
can't remember.
there's so much content out there to watch. It's just crazy.
I love The Crown.
Yeah.
And I think there's a new one of those coming out that I'm looking forward to. I do like shows about I don't really read nonfiction, or I don't really read fiction. I read nonfiction, so I tend to like shows that are about historical events. So that's why I enjoy The Crown. And
I got a recommendation if you like survival, the people that can survive. I mean, have you ever seen Naked and Afraid?
I have.
There's one on Netflix. It's called Alone.
Okay.
And they drop these 10 people in Antarctica, and they have to survive, and it's amazing. I mean, because I can't fathom being able to survive and not eat for one day.
Right.
8 hours. I start getting lightheaded and everything. But it's pretty. It's a interesting. And actually, there's something monetary they actually win. It's like $500,000. So I recommend that one too, man.
Yeah, it's a weird phenomenon, isn't it? The whole
isn't it?
binging thing, and I hate to say it, it's probably not good for like the CBS, ABC, NBC, and Foxes of the world. They've had to kind of adjust, and you hope that people are recording the shows on your network and binging those. But Netflix kind of changed the whole dynamic there.
All right, well, I'll check that out. Well, hey, Mike, as always, brother, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining me. Best of luck, man, and huge fan of you.
Tony,
yours.
you've done so much for us through the years at Fox 4. You've just become a staple on Sunday nights, and once things get back to normal, I hope we can resume our studio visits after whatever Cowboy games there happen to be.
Oh yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. I do a segment called Tony's Take, but I wanted to ask you. Did you ever think that the Cowboys would be this bad with these changes? And let's throw COVID out of the picture, but how bad are they? I mean, how surprised are you that this has been this team this year?
Yeah, I would not have imagined 2-4 in this way. Giving up. I mean, they're on pace to be the worst defense in NFL history in terms of points allowed. I think they're giving up like 38 points a game. For somebody who did what you did so well for so long in the NFL, it just has to pain you to watch them. You lose your quarterback, you're rarely gonna overcome that. But I really thought with Dalton, this would still be an 8-8, maybe even 9-17. Now after Arizona, my opinion's totally changed.
Yeah. Hey, it is what it is. A special thank you to Mike Doocy. Man, what a great interview and just a great all-around dude. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining this broadcast. Continue to follow us on social media. Obviously, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, as far as the broadcast, also YouTube Live. And make sure you share your comments and share this platform and share our show, because that's how we grow. We grow organically. Again, thank you guys for joining me. We'll see you guys next week on the Tony Casillas Show.